Welcome to this online event specifically for early years teachers. My name is Anne Keenan and I'm the National Officer for Education. I've worked with the EIS for just over 3 years now and took over this role in March of this year, shortly before lockdown. When I started, I was so excited as I was asked as one of my first jobs to facilitate a course very similar to this one for early years teachers. The only difference was it was to take place face-to-face and in Murray Place. When it was cancelled, we were all really disappointed, but we vowed that we would try to make this event happen in some context as soon as we could. And here we are today. I'm so pleased that we can come together and begin this conversation about our distinct professional identity as early years teachers and the value of our role in the early years setting. To get us started, I thought it would be helpful to give a brief overview of how we're going to spend the next few hours together. We're going to start by looking at what it is about early years teachers that gives us a unique professional identity and the importance of this role in the education system. We're going to take some time to share our individual stories, which have framed our journeys as early years teachers and have influenced our practice. We'll then look at some of the work that the EIS has undertaken in recent years to promote the significance of this role in the lives of our youngest learners and their families. And then Sheen Yak will update us on some of the work she's been doing in early years over the last year, before we take some time to consider what is next for us as a group and where we go from here. When we were talking about this session, we got to thinking about what it is about the way early years teachers engaged with learners that made the experience so rich and the connection between the teacher and the pupil so meaningful. And the central feature that we kept coming back to was storytelling. That magical stage when you know by the way that you're telling a story that you have the undivided attention of the children who are sitting in front of you. I'm sure that there are those of us here who are parents who can relate to the dad in the first cartoon on this slide. I certainly remember coming home after a long day of work and heading up to read the bedtime story, just hoping that it was going to be a short one. And when you get to the bedroom door, you see the longest storybook in the bookshelf lying out for you, the one with the flaps and the interactive sessions. For me, it was the Jolly Pocket Postman. I don't think I ever read that story in less than half an hour. And yet, as I opened the book, I could hear myself slipping into that storyteller role, adopting a range of voices for the different characters, following the stories within the story, and guessing what was going to happen next. And it's this art of storytelling, particularly in the early years setting, that brings the story and the learning to life. It captures the magic of make-believe and allows all learners to engage and respond in their own unique ways. When I saw the second cartoon on this slide, I thought to myself, yep, books and stories do help us move forward through life. But in early years, the stories alone are not the bridge, but rather the storytellers. We, as early years teachers, recount these tales in rich and relevant contexts with an in-depth knowledge of our children. When I was listening to Sheen Yak tell her beautiful story about the jar of water and how it transformed her practice, it got me thinking about my own story. And I found myself rushing out to the garage to find this, my box of magic beans, left in my first primary 1 classroom by a friendly dragon. I didn't really know what we unleashed that day when we found the magic beans and the children took control of planning the learning, all based around fairyland. We planted the beans in the middle of the classroom, complete with an obligatory magic spell, and I'll never forget their faces when they came in the next day to see the beanstalk in the middle of the floor reaching up to the ceiling and beyond. Their imaginations took off, and before we knew it, they were building a 4-bedroom castle, complete with a turret for Rapunzel. I think you can see it there on the slide. They designed their own patterned wallpaper for each room before moving on to science experiments with the 3 little pigs, numeracy with Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and fantastic opportunities for role play and writing. As a newly qualified teacher, the engagement of the children and the quality of the learning from this project opened my eyes to the value of interdisciplinary learning, but more importantly, to the value of child-led learning. Suddenly, I was hooked. So when the head teacher asked me to go into the nursery the following session, I was off. And for me, these beans changed my whole approach to teaching and learning. Now for us here today, my story is not a new one. That enthusiasm and passion for child-led learning and teaching is a central feature of all your practice. But the role of the nursery teacher is not one that I believe is universally understood or even appreciated. When I took up that role, I was surprised by even members of my own family saying, "Oh, you'll have had an easy day today because all you were doing was playing with the children." And they were really questioning the role of teachers in that setting. It used to remind me of the scene from the life of Brian. What have the Romans ever done for us? What have nursery teachers ever done for us? But like the Romans, when you take time to reflect, it doesn't take long before the value of teachers in early years becomes obvious and the list of contributions endless. In 2016, the EIS commissioned research to be conducted by Professor Aileen Lindsay Dunlop from the University of Strathclyde. And this culminated in the publication of the document that you can see on this slide, Sustain the Ambition. You may already have read this document, but for those of you who haven't or who maybe want to revisit it and look at it in a bit more detail, we'll provide the links with this presentation. The document clearly sets out the value and the contribution made by teachers in the early years setting. In this slide, I've taken some time to list the main values identified in that document, just as a little reminder to ourselves, because we're often quite busy running around the place, just dealing with our own practice, that we sometimes don't take time to stop and recognise or value ourselves. So the research highlighted that we are uniquely placed in Scotland with the 3 to 18 curriculum to ensure that there is continuity of learning and of experience across all sectors of education, from nursery into primary, from primary to secondary, and even in the planning of that transition from school into further and higher education or into work or work-based learning and training. As early years teachers, this knowledge of the curriculum and its application in the primary context allows us to guide and support children seamlessly across the early level. Add to this knowledge of the curriculum the strong understanding which teachers have of children's thinking and the place it has in their learning and development, then it's not difficult to see how teachers use this to link theory and practice to inform next steps in learning. Early years teachers can embrace common teaching approaches like storytelling as part of a continuous curriculum for this level. We are the bridging professionals, easing the move from nursery to school. The research also outlined the key role which early years teachers have in identifying and providing additional support for learning in the sector. Early identification of physical, emotional, learning or behavioural supports is key at this stage and can lead to better outcomes for the child. It is the early years teacher who will often coordinate this with the relevant agencies and who is often part of the team around the child for GIRFEC purposes. We are all only too familiar with the plethora of research which highlights the importance of ensuring effective transitions in the early stages of life. Children navigate many changes in their lives, and it's the way in which the earliest are handled that have the most considerable impact upon how they look forward to or cope with change in the future. Early years teachers make a strong contribution to transitions, from home to nursery, from nursery to primary, and also, importantly, between different activities across the day. Teachers' understanding of child development, combined with their knowledge of each stage across the early level and later primary curriculum, fosters an awareness of how best to prepare the children and their families for this journey. And we all know that for a child to succeed, the family must, as the first and primary educators, also have had some success in that experience too. So another part of the teacher's role is to form good, warm relationships with family members. Fostering rich home learning environments for children is a critical element in interrupting the cycle of poverty that we see across Scotland today. With 1 in 5, and in some areas 1 in 3 of our children living in poverty, the importance of this aspect of the role is vital if we are to begin to address the poverty-related attainment gap. I was lucky enough to participate in a webinar in March of this year to look at research which had been published by the OECD. And that research highlighted the pivotal impact of parental engagement in learning and the irreversible damage which non-engagement before the age of 5 can engender. And the role doesn't stop there, because on top of all of these things, teachers in the nursery setting are leaders of the team, modelling good practice and performing a mentoring role. So that's just a very short and brief overview of the high-level value that GTCS registered teachers play in early years. It doesn't for one moment look at the value which each one of you has brought as an individual to the lives of many children in your settings. And I'm sure that as I say that just now, the faces of many children will be flashing through your minds. Unfortunately, the statistics on this slide would suggest that there is more work to do in highlighting the value which we provide. And maybe we need to tell our stories more often, or in new and different ways if we are to try to reverse this trend. And in doing that, we must also be aware and responsive to the impact of the current health pandemic. This past few months has undoubtedly posed significant challenges for us, each and every one of us, but it has also provided opportunities. It has allowed us to stop and to reflect, to see the value that we provide, and to understand now more than ever that we need GTCS registered teachers in our nurseries. We need teachers in nurseries who are mindful of the holistic development of the child, who are ready to identify special needs and use early intervention strategies to support young children, who will work with other professionals around the child. And I can envisage a situation where we might have to engage with educational psychologists on a more regular basis as we try to deal with the impact of social distancing or the lack of physical contact which some children may have had over the last few months, and the impact which these issues will have on nurture and attachment. We need teachers who will sustain those important family links, mindful of the fact that many families will have been dealing with trauma and poverty. But overall, we need teachers who will build confidence and lead the team in a calm and considered way to ensure the delivery of a high-quality educational provision for our youngest learners. So before we move on to the next part of this event, I want to leave you with this quote from Andy Hargreaves. "We must use collegiality not to level people down, but to bring people together through strength and creativity." When Andy Hargreaves wrote this, I'm sure that he did not envisage the situation that we're living through just now. And yet we're seeing these words being brought to life in the strength and collegiality of all key workers, teachers amongst them. I hope that today we can share in each other's stories to build that collective strength and creativity so that we can feel empowered to move forward as a group and start to write the next chapter in our story for the benefit of our youngest learners. So to start that storytelling process, and in true Blue Peter style, we're now going to listen to Sheen Yak's story, one we prepared earlier.